We started a series on stewardship last week, and in light of that, when I say stewardship, what do most people hear? Money, giving. Yeah, but in light of what we saw last week, what do you hear? I heard it. A relationship with God. Yeah, stewardship is really the outflowing of our relationship with God, as well as an indicator of where we are in our relationship with God. Because the true focus of stewardship, the what of stewardship, is our heart and our commitment. And so that's going to be key, obviously, in our relationship with God there. That's the true focus versus the actions that come from that, then, our giving of our time and our money. And I said sometimes preachers contribute to that misunderstanding. And another thing I think that we're often guilty of is that we very often focus on the what, the giving, instead of the why and the how. And so I want to look at the why today of stewardship. I want to look at the part that we need to understand in our mind. I think I talked last week about, change comes a progression from our mind to our heart to our will. We understand something, we come to believe something, and so we make a commitment with our heart, and then out of that commitment, we act. We don't always act in accordance with our commitment. Sometimes we violate what down deep we want to do, but if we don't have that commitment, we're rarely going to do the right thing. And so I want to look at the why today, the foundation for stewardship. And as I said last week, the focus for all of these sermons, the main idea is that stewardship is living out and living by my Christian faith. This idea that I say I'm a Christian, I have faith, I'm saved by faith. We talk about that. I believe certain things, I've committed to them, I'm relying on God. Well, all right, what does that look like then when it comes to stewardship? That's really what stewardship is. It's just living out this faith that I say I have. And so when there's something lacking in our stewardship, there's something lacking in our relationship with God. It's an indication of that. And once again, as I always say, I hope you'll hear things as an opportunity that if you have a faith relationship with Jesus, this is a chance to increase that, to become more abundant in that life that God wants us to experience. But there's certainly also a serious responsibility we're going to see today in one of the passages. Now, I'm going to be looking at some of the same verses from last week, but again, from that different perspective. Instead of a what perspective, more of a why perspective. Why do we have the responsibility to be stewards? And it goes back to those two foundational events. You remember what I said when we said were the two key events in the history of history? The first one is creation, and the second one is the cross. Then Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. Those are the two things. And so we look at that, our relationship to God as creator. Genesis 1:1 tells us, in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. God created all that there is out of nothing. It tells us in Colossians 1:15 that He, Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, for by Him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through Him and for Him. So as part of that creation, of course, God, Christ, created mankind. He created us. And we saw the verse from Psalms that it's a continued thing. We were knit together in our mother's womb by God. We are His creation. Well, have you ever created anything? What have you created in your life? Any things you've created? Shout them out. What? Well, from nothing, if you talk about out of nothing, we've never created that, but we are creative. We are creators of things. What have you created? Well, I've created some speakers. I have built my own speakers a few times because, just one, I can't afford the ones I really like, so I try to build them what's that? Grandfather's clock. There you go. People, that's happened, yeah. Many of us have done that. A quilt, a bookshelf. All right, the idea is when we create these things, we can do what we want to with them. Now, there's some limits when it comes to children, although the Romans apparently had the idea, but basically, you know what maybe your grandfather used to say, I brought you into this world, I can take you out. I think it was a law for them. It was legal there. But when it comes to other things, we can do whatever we want to with them. You know, when I built my speakers, I could decide I wanted this certain design and this type of sound, and I wanted to paint them this color or stain them this color, although I did run that by Lisa and make sure, will that work in our living room, hon? But I'm the owner. I have authority over those things. Well, is it any different with God? No. Isaiah 64:8 talks about God being the creator in another sense, using this metaphor that comes up throughout the Old Testament. It says, but now, O Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay and you are our potter. We are all the work of your hand. Jeremiah takes that further and says in Jeremiah 18, the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord, he said, arise and go down to the potter's house, and there I will let you hear my words. So I went down to the potter's house, and there he was working at his wheel. And the vessel he was making of clay was spoiled in the potter's hand, and he reworked it into another vessel, as it seemed good to the potter to do. The potter could do whatever he wanted to with that clay because he was the creator of that vessel. He was the creator, he had authority. Now, Jeremiah focuses on God's right to punish or show mercy, but the point is, God has authority over us as his creation, and one implication is he can tell us what to do. He's the creator, he has authority, the owner, he can tell us what to do. It makes no sense for us to deny that, to argue with that. Matter of fact, Isaiah goes on to sort of point that out. It says, woe to him who strives with him who formed him. Woe to the person who strives with God, a pot among earthen pots. I'm just another one who's been created. Does the clay say to him who forms it, what are you making? Your work has no handles. You imagine the potter and the clay's like, hey, I don't want to be made like this. Come on, don't I get some say in this? No. God is the potter, we are the clay. And you know what? That verse emphasizes, of all the verses, here's another one that doesn't use the word, but what a verse about humility. God is God, I'm not. Me trying to, say, God, here's the way it should be, would be like a piece of clay saying to the potter, you need to make me this way. That's the same as us not having humility. And even more, when it comes to God, we said there's two key events, creation and redemption, but there's another aspect to God's creation because, when a potter makes clay, once he's done, he can set that vessel up on the shelf and it'll be good for who knows how long. But the same is not true with us. God's creation needs God's sustaining. And so it says in Colossians 1:16 and 17, you go a verse further than we started, it says, for him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. What that's saying is that God didn't just create the world, and now it's just standing back and watching. God continues to be involved, and even to the point that if God wasn't involved, the world wouldn't hold together. Maybe on the physics, the scientific sense, God is keeping those laws of nature intact so that things hold together. And certainly you can see in the event sense of history, the providential sense of history, what's kept us from annihilating the world with nuclear bombs? Well, God has decided it's not time yet for the world to end. God is sustaining all things in every way. So we have a relationship to God not only as our creator, but as our sustainer. And then we also have a relationship to God as redeemer. Ephesians 1:7 says there that in him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses according to the riches of his grace. Galatians 3:13 says Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. Now there's that word a couple times, redemption, redeem. What does it mean to redeem something? To buy it back, exactly. Something was sold away from us, we're buying it back. Which that right there tells you, if you're buying it back, it was originally yours. And that's how we are with God. And the question is, what were we? Were we sold to Satan? We were sold to the punishment of sin. In the sense that when we sinned, we came under the punishment, and God buys us back from owing that punishment because he paid the penalty. Jesus paid the penalty for us. That was the price. That's how God could buy us back. Well, if you buy something back, again, that means you originally owned it. You had ownership then, you had authority then, and when you buy it back, you have that authority still. So God is the creator and sustainer. God is the redeemer. He's the owner of us. He's the owner of us, and that means of everything about us. Of our time and what we do with that time, our talents, our ability, our health. He's the owner of our money. Why should we be stewards of those? Because they aren't ours. That's what it means to be a steward. As we talk about stewardship, again, the strict dictionary definition of the word is to manage something that's been entrusted to you. Well, until we understand this, until we settle this, until we ingrain this in our mind, we will always struggle with stewardship because we're going to see it as this disconnected what? That I have to give some of my money, that I have to give some of my time, and the real thing there is mine. It's mine, and we think it's mine because, it's in my pocket right now. It's in my bank account. I put in the hours to earn the money, and, I'm the one who gets up and, gets dressed to go use my time in some way. It must be mine. No, I'm the manager of it. I'm the steward of it. It belongs to God. Even our money, we think, I earned it. Yeah, but who gave you the ability to do that? Who gave you the health, the talents, the skills? And again, I went to school and I did this. Well, okay, who gave you the ability to do it? It all goes back to we wouldn't have it without God to start with. It wouldn't still be here without God sustaining it. And it wouldn't be worth anything if we were bound for hell. And what would it matter that we had all this money? Again, it's all God's. We are here to manage it. And again, until we get that straight, we'll always struggle. If we give it all, we'll give out of, I have to do this. I better do it now. Oh, yeah. Steve's been talking about it for a month. I'll do it for a while now, and feel better. I need to get to the point that I realize I am the manager of what isn't mine. As a manager, if you're a manager, or you certainly understand how a manager is, they don't own the things. They manage it. It's not theirs. They've been entrusted. They are stewards in that sense, and we are too. Well, since God is the owner, again, that makes us the manager, makes us the steward of things, and our whole attitude should be to faithfully manage what God has entrusted to us. And there's one parable that talks about this. You're probably thinking about it, the parable of the talents. I want to go ahead. That's Matthew, if you want to turn to it, Matthew 25. And we're going to read this because it is all about an owner entrusting things to managers and what they do with them and what he expects of them to do with it. So Matthew chapter 25, verse 14. Again, I read from the English Standard Version. It says, "For it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. But the master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap what I have not sown and gather where I have scattered no seed? Well, then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Now, there are all kinds of things. We could spend a whole sermon on this, and when it comes to the similar parable in Luke, we'll do that. But I just want to get some things that apply most directly to what we're looking at today. First of all, realize that talents, we get a little confused with that word because it sounds like talent. And so we think, well, talent, that's, my skills, my abilities, that I use my time for. But talent was a unit of measure of money in Jesus' day. So he entrusted them with a certain amount of money. And for us, the application is it's anything that we've been entrusted with by God. So it does apply to our time and our talent. It also applies to our money. God has expectations then for what he entrusts to us, just like this master did. They knew what it was, the servants. Even the one who didn't do it knew what he expected of him. So God has expectations of us. It's not like he entrusts us with things and has, given us no idea what he wants us to do with them. God has told us what he wants us to do with our time. God has told us how he wants us to use our time with our abilities and our experiences. And God has told us what he wants to do with our money. And we're going to look at the details of those things next week. But I think we'd all agree God has some expectation. What is it? What is it specifically? And here's the other thing to realize. God's expectations go beyond just don't do evil with it. Don't do something bad with what I've given you. You look at this servant, he didn't do anything evil with the money. It's not like he, took his master's money and stole it and ran out of town. That'd be wicked, that'd be evil in the outright sense. Well, the same thing for us as we look at this. There is times when the Bible brings up the question, do we even have faith? Do we have a saving faith at all? Bible tells us that we are saved by through faith, not by works. It is never, ever, 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 ever a matter of how many good things have I done versus how many bad things have I done. All right, God weighs them out. Yeah, you're in. It's never that. God never looks at our amount of works and bases our salvation on that. It is based on our faith. But James makes it clear, faith without works is dead. There is something that needs to accompany our faith, and it's not so much God, it's not at all, not so much. God doesn't add our works to our faith. God says if there are no works, then you don't really have faith. Because faith is saying, I believe there's a God, I believe Jesus is his son, I believe Jesus died for me and rose from the dead, and I've made this commitment to live for him. Faith includes surrender and reliance to God. Well, if I've truly done that, when I'm faced with the opportunity then to live for God in whatever way that situation dictates, if I do, that means I truly have faith. And if I never do, it means I don't have faith. Now, will I do it perfectly? Not at all. But if I don't do it at all, then I don't have true faith. I might have belief. I might believe there is a God and believe Jesus was his son. He died for sins, and that's, accepting that's how you get out of hell and go to heaven. I can believe all that. But you remember James says even the demons believe in their mind. But he distinguishes that and faith. Faith is when all of that belief, when I'm faced with an opportunity, I do something. My faith is made complete. When I do something, it's shown that you really do have faith. Because right now, I have faith and you don't know it. Can you see it? No, but when I'm faced with a situation, whatever it is, to live for God in some way, that's where you can see it. That's where I can see it and know, do I really have it? I'm faced with it and I face that situation in a certain way. Oh, yeah, there is real faith there. Works indicate if we have faith or not. How many? What kind? Well, again, it's not like the Bible gives you a number and says, well, here's where it is. It's whenever I'm faced with something. Do I live it out for God? Now, you can't draw exact parallels with parable details, but it's interesting. It says, but when he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money, again, it doesn't say he spent it on something else. It doesn't even say he took a vacation. He hid it in the ground and said, I'm not even going to be a servant. The master's away, the servants will play. That's what I'm going to do. Take off. Doesn't say he did that. So apparently he still did servant things. He just didn't do what he was supposed to do with everything he was entrusted with. Well, how's that apply to us? I keep bringing up this verse, Luke 9:23, because I think it's a verse that doesn't get brought up enough. Jesus said to them all, whoever wants to be my disciple, that's your choice. But here's how it has to be. You must we must deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. That is the essence of Christianity. That denying ourselves, taking up our cross daily, and following God, that's what our faith needs to look like. I believe it. I've made a commitment to it. That's what I've committed to do. Whatever that looks like in a general situation. Well, I couldn't help but think, is there anything about that verse or others that indicates that showing up on Sunday equals what that verse is talking about? If that's all a person does is shows up on Sunday, do I really think that I'm living out the faith that James says is real? Am I living out what Jesus says about denying myself, taking up my cross daily, and following him? And you might think, well, I don't just show up on Sunday morning for church. I come to Sunday school too. Whoa. I say that because we've come to think that way. Matter of fact, I think, and I've talked before, that I believe that we put too much emphasis on Sunday morning, especially the worship service, and so it fosters that mentality. A long time ago, at least, I remember there being some confusion where people, we would really try to stress the fact, this building is not the church. We all know that, right? Even those people still talk that way. There's 3 churches on Main Street. They're saying 3 buildings, and they're calling them churches. We know that's not right, but we've shifted to an attitude or a mindset and understanding that says church is an event. What are you going to do after church? And we're going out to lunch after church. After that event where people meet together in here, that's what church is. It's an event. And so other events are also part of that, And so if I come to enough of those events, well, then I've gone to church a lot, and that must be what God wants. But that's not the New Testament pattern, principle, approach to church. We are the church. We are the called out ones, and that is to affect us every day of our life, not just for the time we spend here. And that's the only way, if we view our lives that way, the only way we're going to live out Jesus' command to disciples that says, if you want to follow me, here's the way it has to be. When I view all of my life that way, when I view all of my life as something that God owns and I'm managing, that's all we can do. Well, people might think, well, Steve, things are different now. Jesus was talking 2,000 years ago, hey, we're in a modern society. Well, the servants there, again, if you want to take the details of the parable, it's not like the master gave them time off to invest. So you skip all your servant duties and just work on investing. No, they still had to do that. And I realize that's a parable, but we know in the New Testament for real, many of New Testament Christians were slaves. You think they got special treatment? That's why Corinthians talks about the problem that the rich people would show up early and eat all the food. Slaves couldn't get there till later. Why couldn't they? Because they were slaves. They had a busy schedule. And I think sometimes we look at that, it's like, Steve, you just don't understand, especially when it comes to my time. I'm so busy. I get busy. We live on a farm now. I really get busy. Like, there's always something else. And then Lisa buys another animal, and there's 10 more something else's. And I love the animals, or at least I love my wife who loves the animals. I get busy. I'm busy. You're busy. We're all busy. But let me say a few things. First of all, it's possible to be too busy. It is possible. I realize our society almost thinks that's a good thing. If you're busy, that means you're dedicated, you're hard work, all those. It's possible to be too busy and need to make changes. If you can't live out your Christian commitment, then there might be a need to cut back on some things, even things you like, and sacrifice. Second, a large part of stewardship is mindset and approach. It's not necessarily doing different things, but it's doing the things differently. Doing them as a steward of God and realizing my whole life and all my money, it belongs to God, not just the part I directly, specifically give to Him, which that's a whole nother matter that we think those are the God things and the rest of them, that's mine. View my whole life as, how am I living my life? Am I living it in a way so that every moment is laying down my cross to Jesus and seeing how can I be about as I'm going, making disciples? Change our mindset. Third, the choice should have already been made. As we talk about this, here, I'm hoping you will do this today. No, if you are a Christian, you said already, I will do this. Now, unfortunately, in today's world, maybe you didn't understand that because sometimes we, leaders, present it as, here, accept Jesus so you can get out of hell and go to heaven. And then later we tell you, oh, you have to be a disciple too. You have to live the Christian life too. You have to lay down your life, daily, pick up your cross too. And that's unfortunate, but the truth is, that's what Jesus said. Maybe we didn't realize, but we signed a blank sheet when we became Christians. God fills in what it is there. And maybe we don't realize it. It's not because we can't, it's because we really don't want to. I've sort of become comfortable with this, 21st century Christian American idea of what it means to live for Christ. You show up at church, you don't do bad things, you try to do some good things. I can handle that Christianity. Denying myself, taking up the cross, following Jesus every day. Ooh, that sounds intense. It is. And I realize it can even sound very close to guilt versus opportunity today, but really comes down to this. Do you believe God's way is best? Do you believe what he says, including Jesus saying, here's what it means to be a disciple, a follower of me, is to lay down your cross, lay down your life, pick up your cross and follow me daily. Do you believe that's best? I think on some level we do. We just have trouble putting it into practice. It reminds me of a verse in the Bible, Psalm 37:4, that I think is interesting. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Do you ever read that verse or hear that verse and say, oh, he hasn't? I got all kinds of things I'd like to have, and God hasn't given them to me. Well, the first thing when that becomes an issue, when you see a Bible verse that doesn't look like it's ringing true in your life, is, am I doing it right? I'm trying to think of illustrations. We've got a little garden tractor, and there's sometimes I forget you have to push in on the clutch or the brake, or don't even know what on the left. And when you turn the key, it won't start. So there's times I turn the key and what's wrong with this thing? Well, nothing's wrong with this thing. I wasn't doing it right. What's wrong with this verse? Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. No, he hasn't. Well, have I really delighted myself in the Lord? True delight, that he is the epitome of everything I want in my life. Well, maybe I haven't done that. I came to church, though. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. What is the real desire of our heart? To worship God, to have that relationship with God. Anything else isn't really the desire of my heart. Now, I think it is, because the heart can be deceived more than anything else. The heart can deceive us. So they go together. When I delight myself in the Lord, God will give me the desires of my heart, because that is the true desire of my heart. But I've got to really delight myself in the Lord. If I show up on Sunday and then say, well, gee, this doesn't seem to be impacting me much. Yeah, you're right. Because that's not really delighting myself in the Lord. That's a 24/7 thing, not a once-a-week thing. That's me using what God's given me as a faithful steward all the time, not just a little bit here and there. Well, what do I need to do? I would ask this, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much have I realized the implications of God being my creator, sustainer, and redeemer? As I've talked about it, has it oh, I didn't really think about it that way. How much have I realized prior to today on a scale of 1 to 10? How has that level of understanding affected my attitude toward and practice of stewardship in all areas? And because I didn't really realize what the implications were of God being creator and redeemer, I wasn't really the best steward, because it never really clicked with me. I didn't have the why, and so my what suffered. And then what is one thing I can do to change my stewardship when it comes to stewardship? How I manage the things God has given me. First of all, in my time, in my abilities, my experiences, my money. What's one thing I can do? Pick one of those areas, my time or my money, to live out more what it means that God's the owner, I'm the manager. He's God, I'm not. Here's what he said to do. If I don't do it at all, I just believe the facts. I'm not living by faith. Find one thing you can do today, and I challenge you to do that. And there is an opportunity then to see and experience this relationship with God more fully.